Now, we're going to welcome Pam Warhurst. We're going to cross the channel, we're going to the UK, to Todmorden. Todmorden is a city, 30,000 inhabitants, and, well, the future was not bright, let's face it, at one stage. But, well, yet several inhabitants, among whom Pam Warhurst, who's the founder of the movement Incredible Edible, and the impact went well beyond the borders of the city, or the confines of the city, and there are social, environmental, economic, and impacts. And now there are communities that are started all over the world. Pam, you're on.
Okay, first I've got to make sure I can make this work. No? Aha! Erratic, but anyway, we'll try. Wasn't that a fantastic presentation? I really want to nick that and do it in England. That would be great. Okay, I just want to tell you a story, and it's a story that started 7 years ago in... Oh, I'm going to have trouble with this. Hang on. Just bear with me a minute, guys. Yes, I'm going to do it this way. Okay. It started 7 years ago in a town like this. This is my town. This is Todmorden. And I've been told by the people that manage all the language that I can speak as fast as I like because they'll keep up with me. How fantastic is that? So, this is Todmorden. As you can see, it's in the north of England. It's between Leeds and Manchester. It is not good growing territory. It is not the south of France. It grows a few sheep that kind of like keep going on the hillsides and not a lot else. But now it looks kind of more like that, which has, it's become a town that's got flowers, fruits, vegetables, herbs, orchards springing up all over the place, right in the middle of town. We call them propaganda gardens. We call them that because we think guerrilla gardening sounds far too aggressive. And actually, they're gardens that start conversations. And we're doing this not because we're bored out of our minds, because we've nothing else to do in our town, but we have grave concerns about our children's future. And the whole point of Incredible Edible is to say, nobody is grasping the nettle of the environmental cliff that we're on. Nobody's really taking seriously what we can do ourselves as ordinary human beings, not worrying about the exact nature of the temperature rise or sea level or whatever, not wanting a report or a strategy document or a policy document, not waiting for somebody else to do some more research, because we all know we have changes ahead, and we all know that our children are going to have some really challenging times, not just economic, but also environmental. So what can we do ourselves without waiting for permission, without waiting for a check, without asking anybody's right to do something that is our gift for our children? What could we actually do to motivate an entire town to think differently about itself, to think about the skills that it's going to need in the future, to think about the spaces around it and what we ourselves want from those spaces, to think about how we behave towards our neighbours and how we wish to behave in the future, and to start to believe that we are not victims anymore. We are part of a solution of a kinder future. Is it possible we can find something that unifies us all, that helps us all see our little piece of the jigsaw? And obviously, the answer is yes, it's possible. And obviously, the answer is food. And so 7 years ago, I'll tell you how this was invented. I got on a train in London, and I'm so delighted to be asked to speak at this event, which is all about what would happen if we were brave enough to put food at the very heart of the way we live every bit of our lives. 7 years ago, I was in London at a landscape conference on sustainability. We talked about the use of resources. We talked about overconsumption. We talked about increased, poor and rich, south and north. We talked about all these issues. Well, it was either a matter of getting on the train and getting very drunk, or inventing a movement. And I thought, it'd be better for the waistline if I invented a movement. So I invented a movement. I got on the train, and in 2.5 hours, I didn't consult, I didn't ask, I didn't do anything other than draw up a simple model, which is this. And the model is, if we put food, local food, at the very heart of the place we care about, it's our town, it's our village, it's our borough, whatever it might be, right at the heart of our community. So we walked through edible landscapes. Our children lived at the heart of edible landscapes every single day, wherever they are, not just in the great parts of the world, but in the heart of our urban centres. What might that do about what our children might think about their relationship to food, their relationship to the environment, their own personal responsibilities to do something? I don't know, it's an experiment. Let's see. And what if we actually put local food at the heart of learning? We started to think about skilling up around how to cook well, how to grow well, how to preserve out of season, how to make sure that irrespective of our age, our income, or our ability, we could look after our own people. What if we actually did that ourselves? And what if we also tried to influence our schools? Because I don't know what it's like in France, but in the UK, food is not important. Our children have become tick boxes. They are not taught how to survive well in the future, despite the fact that we have a huge obesity problem, as we heard about this morning in the States, and all the other social issues that we understand come from simply not feeding our communities well. And then if we've got edible landscapes that we're walking through, and then if we're reskilling around food, is it not logical that there are more opportunities for us to become entrepreneurs in the food industry? Is it not possible for us to realise that the euro or the pound in our pocket can determine what we see on our high street, can determine the future of our markets, and instead of having to make up new markets, can reinvigorate the markets of our market towns on which our farmers and our land managers are so dependent? And if we actually, each and every one of us, just got on with doing that day in and day out, is it not possible that the jigsaw we could create, the picture that we could make, would be one of strong, happy, healthy kind of communities? That's the proposition. It's not about technology. It's not original. It's not even very clever. It's just joined up from everything that in our bones we know makes sense. So I've got lots of pictures now. Community. What do edible landscapes look like? And can I tell you, I am not a landscape gardener. Can I also tell you, I'm not a master grower. I like to cook. I've run a few shops. But the point is, we've started a conversation in which other people who have got the talents that we need to change this world and redefine prosperity can engage. And that's what's been important about the last 7 years. Right, edible landscapes. Okay, well, one of the first ones we did, this is a verge on the end of town. Now, I'm conscious when I look at these, it all looks very grey, and I look outside and it's all very sunny. So imagine the skies are blue. Okay, this is a verge on the edge of town. It was a dog toilet. It was a place that was owned by the local authority but never looked after. As a result of that, people threw down fag packets, or they threw down cans or whatever. So we just put our gloves on and we went out there and we stripped it of all the things that were horrible, and we planted in it all the things that were edible. Cherry trees, apple trees, herbs, and we put signs by the side of them because there's a role for everybody in this incredible movement. You don't just have to be a grower. Use your imagination. There's all sorts of doors to go through. Now, we never asked the local authorities' permission to do that. Why on earth would you ask their permission? It was horrible. So it's our gift to the town. And anyway, I often think, and I used to lead a local authority, and I used to run health centres, and I have advised governors and all sorts of things all over the place. It's much kinder, don't you think, if you don't force them to say no. Just do it. So that is what we do, and we turned it from that into this. And now it's a lovely site. People can go and pick their own herbs by the side. We don't expect them to do that all the time, but it encourages them to think, I could do that in my front garden. I could do that on my windowsill. Oh, I didn't know I could grow that in this climate. And the other interesting thing it does is it changed the behaviour of the public authority, because instead of not loving it, they now mow it and they've put a bench there so that people can sit and enjoy it. And we never asked for that. But isn't it interesting that once the community says enough, we're going to change how we want to live our lives, other people will actually come and join the party. And then we took over the front of our local college. We did ask their permission, but we got some wood. We took up all the plants that you couldn't eat. And from a demolition yard, we built raised beds. We put a membrane in there because we weren't sure of the nature of the soil that we were growing in. And now people all over the place help themselves to what grows along those areas, whether it's edible flowers, whether they want to adopt a bed and grow coriander, whether they're growing beans. The other interesting thing is, they never get vandalised. people don't vandalise food. If they did, you'd replant it, but they actually don't. We put bean poles in there, so we grew broad beans and green runner beans and all manner of beans, and we thought, okay, 5 minutes and people will be, poking each other in the eye with them, and never. 9 months on, people don't do that. They still pick the heads off the daffodils in the park, but they do not vandalise food. And then the health centre. We had to have a propaganda garden at the health centre. I mean, for goodness sake. I don't know what happens in France, but in the UK, we build brand new health centres, we surround them with plants that you can't eat, and then we run a multi-million-pound Eat 5 a Day campaign and expect people to get healthier. Well, I've got a suggestion for public health, and that is, instead of doing that, use the money and make edible gardens around every single health centre that you've got, every single hospital that you've got. Because what happens then is, the families, some of the poorest families who aren't touched by eat a kiwi or whatever it might be, actually go to the doctors and their children get used to tasting the raspberries, tasting the strawberries, tasting whatever. We did all this without asking for money. It's what you've got in your own garden and you can replant. It's what you grew from a bottom drawer in a seed packet that you've forgotten about. There's all sorts of ways of creating edible landscapes without looking for lottery grants all the time. And at the back, and yes, it takes a lot of time, and yes, there are a lot of people who spend an awful number of hours trying to keep up with all this, but this was a car park, and we asked the doctors would they mind if we took it over, and we've made an apothecary garden where the people can go and they can pick the herbs, and they can pick the mint, and they can make their tea, and they can just feel better about life. And isn't that the point of health centres? And then, because we got a sense of humour, we asked the police. Now, this again is the main road. This is our police station, but they had a fantastic area that you would want to grow on. So we won some money in a local competition, actually, and we built these raised beds. And we planted sweet corn, not because that is indigenous to the north of England, because it's not, but because it made us laugh. And in particular, the interesting thing here is the police have said from their own records that community relations between themselves have never been better because of the conversations that start with the police around the sweet corn growing at the front, or the chard, or whatever else it might be, and environmental damage in the middle of town is down. For that reason I said before, people do not vandalise their food. So that's fantastic. And we now have police from all over the north of England visiting us to see how you can do it. And it's not cost them a penny. So we're very popular. And then there are other propaganda gardens. You'd expect one along the railway station where we've put in herb beds so people help themselves when they got off a train, or at the corner of a car park which we've flooded with edible flowers or whatever people might need to make their salads look jollier, or to show their children just the range of things that they can actually eat. And one of the last propaganda gardens that I want to show you is here at the job centre, where unemployed people used to have to walk across that boring bit of tarmac when they'd lost their job, they'd got no money, they didn't know what their future was going to be. So we made for them an edible frontage, just to inspire them that they might be able to think, I've got spare time, I could reskill. Or maybe this is something that I would want to, think about getting a job in. I don't know. But it starts to be positive, not negative. And what we're trying to do in our town is create positive solutions. Those are the edible landscapes. We're making them all over the place. You could do, once you start to see space in your town, you start to see things completely differently. But how do we do it? Because in the UK, we've forgotten so much. The average age of our farmer is 58. There's no succession planning whatsoever. Nobody's teaching our kids how to do it in the schools, and they're certainly not teaching them how to cook it if they've grown it. So how do they do it? We're all volunteers. We teach children to poke eyes out with forks like that. No, we don't. Sid was just starting to learn how to work with some bigger tools. We work in the classrooms. We work in the spare spaces around the schools where, yes, schools do teach children, but usually when the money stops, the teaching stops. So we like to be there working with the families in support and take that right through from being ever so little to being older, and taking them through some basic training with a BTEC, which is a qualification for 15, 16-year-olds in the UK, so that they can imagine what a fantastic job it would be to be able to feed my community, to be able to get a job on the land. We teach kids about pollinators, and we use spaces around schools that nobody's using. This is a disused tennis court, which nobody was using. We put 30 raised beds in there. We gave it to a local low-income estate. People adopted the beds and started to have conversations across those low-income groups about how you could actually within your own community, without anybody giving you permission, start to learn some really new trades. We go on the middle of the street. Again, we never ask people's permission for doing it. We've raised money for a tent. We put up a tent. We start to cook, whatever is seasonal. Because this is not a movement for people who read, the top-notch newspapers, who have got the degrees and the qualifications. You will sort yourselves out. You will be able to eat local food. You will know what organic is all about. For the vast majority of people who just don't take part in that conversation, how do you get them engaged? You have to trust them. They want a better future for their children. They don't know where to start. That's where Incredible Edible comes in. We also teach people how to graft trees, because if we want orchards all over our places, all over our towns, they can be quite expensive. So by teaching people how to graft, we can produce orchards more cheaply. And because we don't do negative, in response to GMOs, what we're really interested in is going back to heritage varieties that used to grow well in difficult climates, that are known to work in different parts of the world. So now we have a club, because it's illegal for us to actually sell them, because the big boys have bought up all the rootstock and everything else. So we collect the seeds, we pass them all over the place, we start to grow them in public places as well. And now we have our heritage small enterprise, so that people can start to see the differences of varieties that we all used to know so well. So edible landscapes, learning new skills. How do we make sticky money? How do we keep money in the local community? Because once we can't fly beans all over the planet, once we have to change the way we use fossil fuels, once we can't use oil to the extent we did, we will need the skills in our local community. How could we as volunteers? No particular skill sets around this. What could we do? So we started with our market, because we're a market town. We fundraised and we got these blackboards, and we put them up in our market stalls wherever anybody was selling anything local, and they would put what they sold, and that would start a conversation. And over time, that encouraged other people to start to create market stalls and sell more local food. That encouraged the farmers to start to upskill and invest in what they were producing. And gradually, over 7 years, it's not a 1, 2, 3 year program. Over 7 years, we've started to see people thinking about investment in food. New jobs, new market stalls, apprenticeships. It's small, but it's starting. In every single one of our cafes now, there is something that is local, and it is marked up as local food. It might be beer. It might be cheese from a local farm. It might be pickles. This is the north of England. We don't do stuff like this normally. So you have got such a head start on us, because you know so many of these things already. And in a local food survey in 2012, it's way out of date. But because we have no paid staff, until a statistician wants to come and help us, we make do with what we've got. This was done from a local university group, and we see that local businesses were gaining confidence. We had stimulated demand, commerce will follow. It's a no-brainer. But then what was the other thing we did for the economy? We invented a new form of tourism. It is called vegetable tourism. And people from all over the world visit us to look at the raised beds and the things that we are growing. And they are not doing that because we grow better than anybody else. They're doing that because it is living proof that we are changing the landscape of our lives, and through that, how we feel about ourselves. So what could we do? Do you know, we're huge in China and Korea. We just don't know what they're saying about us because we can't understand it. But every single month we have film crews from Europe or America or New Zealand. It's that yes we can attitude. Because the powers that be, and I used to be part of all that stuff, haven't got the solutions. And you can only go so far without the people. And the people's the difficult bit. So it's been great. What did we do? We created a green route. We got some local designers. We made it up. We said, what if we actually joined up all the propaganda gardens and signposted them? And on top of that, had them walking through our market hall and through our shops and our cafes. So we changed the footfall and the way that people spend their money at the same time. So that's what we did. And it's not the most glorious route you've ever seen in your entire life. But it could be totally fantastic the more people we get with creativity to improve it. It starts off with this bunch of people who are from Venezuela at the railway station. It goes down to our local canal where we've created a long edible towpath. We didn't ask permission to do that. It was another dog toilet. Why would you ask? We just used our time and our love, and we created the sorts of herbs. We've got apricots, we've got plums, we've got all sorts of things growing on there. And dogs don't make a mess of it. And people don't destroy it. It's just a great part of our town. We've even got a little, this is for the waggle dance of the bee. A local artist created this wooden willow sculpture in order that children could start to walk through it, and at the end we're told they'd done the waggle dance of the bee, which was another story to take home to mum and dad. We've got our various businesses along the route starting to put herb beds and tumbling tomatoes and other things in front of their shops to support what we're doing. And right in the middle of our town, where there was hoardings all around, right next to our market, and it was horrible, we persuaded the local authority to take it down, and we made a corner of it edible. That is not a real street sign, we just made it up, and that is not a real beehive, we just wanted a conversation. But it's right next to our market hall, and as a result of that, the local council have put picnic benches and a wildflower meadow to complement it. We never asked them to do that, they just saw that it made sense. We've got spin-off social enterprises. Working in partnership with our high school, we managed to get some lottery money. It was a nightmare. And we've built an aquaponics, hydroponics and permaculture centre so that our children can start to think about how they can produce urban food in an urban setting. If Jonathan Porritt is right, and by 2050 we're going to have to produce 40% of our food from more urban settings, we'd better start training our urban farmers. Because who the heck's going to do it? Maybe these kids. And another market garden training centre where we got some land that was very muddy. We managed to get some funding to put a fence around it, and we've turned it into a market garden training centre. We do have planning permission for that now, but we didn't when we started it. But we do have workers, we do have apprenticeships, we do have community ownership. And all we were trying to do is to demonstrate that you don't have to wait for the powers of be to tell you. You can do it. You just need to do it. And is it spreadable? Have we got something that seems to be liked by ordinary folks on the street? Well, apparently, yes. Because all over these sprouts in the United Kingdom are communities bringing food to community, learning and business. They need help. We've created a network so that we can advise, so that we can share, so that we can mentor, so that we can just learn from each other. Because it's not rocket science. We're just trying to create kind of communities. And has it worked in France? Well, apparently, yes. Françoise tells me that you've got 200 plus incredible communities across France. We have a representative here today of one of those. It's been fantastic. That very visible demonstration of people saying food matters at the heart of their lives and then taking it through the stages that is needed in order for it to be a real legacy for our children. It's been great. It's been the best thing I've ever done in my entire life. I'm going to do it till the day I die. But the one lesson I've learned from this whole thing, from the people that laughed, from the folks that said you needed top down, you needed the money, it was all too sophisticated, is you have to believe in the power of small actions because it can change the future. Thank you.